Good morning, everyone. This is Chuck N. Baker at the news desk with the Veterans Reporter News. And let me tell you some of the segments we have coming up for you today. We have a couple of new motion pictures that have come out about veterans. One of them was filmed locally. One was filmed in California. We're going to bring you some film clips on the one that was done in California, and we're going to tell you a little about it as we go on here. We also have a real brief clip back in at Memorial Day in May out at the Veterans Memorial Cemetery. Representative Shelley Berkeley, the Democratic representative, she had her veterans liaison, Jesse Hotchkiss, announced her engagement to a military man, her fiance by the name of Captain Joe. And we have just a little bit of that. At the same time that she was making that announcement, a person from the audience came up, Kathy Navin. Kathy Navin has been on our show before. Kathy came up to congratulate Jesse and everybody. Kathy's situation is that back in the 60s, her fiance went to Vietnam and was killed. So she has kind of dedicated her life to helping veterans and making sure that veterans have it a little bit easier than some of those guys that fought the Vietnam War and didn't get support from a lot of people in the USA. Also at that cemetery, in addition to Representative Berkeley, we have Representative Joe Heck. That way we kind of balance it out between a Democrat and a Republican. And Joe Heck made some nice remarks about remembering Memorial Day. We're going to bring you a little snippet of what he had to say. We're also going to talk about an event that happened back in 1988. A gentleman produced a film about what he called the coming ice age. He seemed to think that, well, even though we have global warming and greenhouse gases, he has some evidence that we were going to freeze over here in the world. And you have to make up your own mind. Even though the tape came out in '88, we just received a copy and we're going to bring you some of that. And finally, we're going to take you to the American Legion Convention, which was held recently up in Reno. And Joe Rigsby, who was the commander of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, VFW, he was a guest speaker at the American Legion, so we're going to bring you a little bit of his speech. He kind of wanted to bring the veterans organizations together because they all have the same goal, helping veterans. So let's listen to a few minutes of a film called Least Among Saints. That's the film that was shot in Los Angeles. And the fellow who did that film, his name is Martin Papazian. He produced and directed it, and it's been released in Southern California and in New York and in Washington, D.C. We're hoping it gets to Southern Nevada, but perhaps it'll be out on DVD soon, and if it doesn't get into theaters, you can get it that way. But we're going to bring you a few minutes of Martin Papazian's movie, Least Among Saints.
So, Sergeant Hayworth, you served 8 years overseas, multiple tours of duty as a squad leader.
Yes, sir.
File shows that you were hit by some IEDs.
A couple.
You suffer any head injuries, anything that you didn't walk away from?
I get headaches once in a while, some ringing in my ears.
Yeah. Tinnitus. Unfortunately, that only gets worse. Any trouble sleeping?
Some.
No rest for the wicked, eh? So, is there anything else I should know about? Anything that's not mentioned in the file?
Negative, sir.
Well, if you need to talk to anyone, the division psychiatrist is available to you at any time, as is a chaplain. We have a very good therapy program here at the base. Want to hang around for another
6 months? No, thank you, sir. I just want my discharge.
Well, you've certainly earned it, Sergeant Hayworth. Good. Anyone waiting for you at home?
Just divorce papers waiting for my signature.
Mom, Dad?
Deceased.
Well, if anything comes up, if you have any issues of any kind, you make sure you talk to someone. All right? Good. Good to go, son.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Good luck, son.
Go home. You don't live here anymore, Anthony. Go home.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that little film clip. And there was another film that came out just very recently here in Las Vegas. It was done by UNLV student Anthony Diaz V, and it's called Forgotten Heroes. Now, we don't have a film clip from Forgotten Heroes, but what we do have, and I'd like to read to you, is a letter that was written to the Gold Star Wives. The Gold Star Wives is a group of women whose husbands were killed in combat or killed as a result of being in the military, illness and disease and what have you. Now, a lady by the name of Lanny Dizan wrote a letter about this movie, which I did see the other day in Las Vegas. Excellent film. And the letter says, "I'm the daughter of one of your Gold Star members in Long Beach, California. On June 23rd, my mother attended a private screening of a short film that took her breath away. Both my mother and I have never experienced a film that has touched us so deeply and speaks directly to the silent struggle that military families face daily. I had the privilege of participating in a small part in the film, but initially did not understand the story or its entirety, or how it not only directs and impacts military families, but in every American in a very profound way." Now, the short film is called Forgotten Heroes. It was written, directed, and edited by UNLV film student and aspiring filmmaker that depicts an unspoken reality of what so many of our U.S. troops and their families endure. It's a compelling American story that needs to be shared, especially in light of our current situation in the Middle East. Forgotten Heroes was created in Las Vegas, but premiered in other countries, mainly within Asia, and it has received astounding reviews. Why I have stressed such importance of this film and the dedication to Gold Star Wives? Because I lost my father as Senior Chief Petty Officer in the Navy at the young age of 12. He was only 43 and my mother was 42 at the time of his death. I went through the struggles as a young child with my siblings, and I'm most especially torn by what my mother as a young widow was faced with, which still continues after 27 years. My company and I have become full supporters of the film, and I'm doing my share to spread the word. I feel it deeply represents Gold Star Wives, and most of all, it's a riveting film, and it's my hope that it gets the attention that it deserves. That was a letter from Lanny Dizan. Well, Ms. Dizan, you have echoed my sentiments. It is definitely a film worth watching. I hope we can get to see more of it here in Las Vegas besides the screening that I went to. Well, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back shortly. Welcome back to the Veterans Reporter. I'm your host, Chuck N. Baker. And, we're going to bring you this very brief film clip by Jessie Hotchkiss, the Veterans Liaison for Representative Shelley Berkley. She was at the Veterans Cemetery on Memorial Day, and Representative Berkley announced Jessie's engagement to Captain Joe, military fiance. And we are going to bring you a little bit of that. And as I mentioned earlier, someone in the audience, Kathy Navin, she kind of jumped up and congratulated Jessie and Captain Joe and the representative. Now, right from there, we're going to take you right into Representative Heck, who spoke at the cemetery that day. We had quite a few people who spoke there that day, but we're just going to bring you a few minutes of the words of Representative Joe Heck. That way, we kind of balance the Democrats and the Republicans. So this whole segment just takes a few minutes. Let's see how it looks.
I'd like to congratulate you. Thank you. This is the soldier fiance that didn't come home.
Oh, thank you
Thanks.
so much.
For veterans today.
Thank
God
you
bless
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This is a veteran that didn't come home. Wonderful.
Please help me welcome the captain home and to congratulate these two young people. And let's toast that man and all those men.
Where we recognize our servicemen and women, honor our veterans and survivors, and remember our fallen heroes. So over the years, as I've had the chance to come to these ceremonies, I've talked about what Memorial Day means to me over the 21 years of service I've had in the Army Reserve. But I thought that today, as we actually enter the second decade of conflict in the Middle East, that I'd pay homage to those from Nevada that have made the ultimate sacrifice. There's been an incredible toll on a small state like Nevada and on a small place like Clark County, where we've lost over 78 fine young men with ties to Nevada over the past 10 years. We can talk about the youngest. We had 4 of them at the age of 19. A life waiting ahead of them full of hopes and aspirations that they'd never had the opportunity to fulfill. Private First Class John Lukac, Lance Corporal Nicholas Anderson, Lance Corporal Richard Perez Jr., Specialist Travis Bergadamo. We remember the oldest, at age 46, had a life, family, career, First Sergeant Carlos Saenz. We recall the name of the first combat casualty from Clark County, Corporal Matthew Commons, right here in Boulder City. Died March 4th, 2002, and whose name will always be remembered because VFW Post 36 here in Boulder City, my VFW post, is now named the Matthew Commons VFW Post.
Welcome back to the Veterans Reporter News. We're going to bring you a little segment right now about global warming. Back in 1988, a film came out called Stopping the Coming Ice Age. Back at that time, it looked as if glaciers were growing and we were all going to freeze, and we had terrible floods around the nation. We've had some terrible floods recently in Louisiana with Katrina. Over here at the UNLV not long ago, we had a humongous rainstorm. Other places in the south and the southeast were flooded out. But it seems that since that video came out, we haven't really had the ice age. We've actually seen more global warming. Here's an article from the LA Times. Report of record low ice follows a strange summer at the top of the world. Well, here's another article. This is also from the LA Times, and it says that there's a dramatic ice melt seen in Greenland. We have a fellow by the name of Richard Mueller, who was a kind of a expert, and he said, no, we don't have global warming, but now he's changed his mind. He's kind of turned around on that, because obviously we seem to have global warming. Here's an article from the Las Vegas Sun. Eugene Robinson says, you still don't believe in climate change? Then you're either deep in denial or delirious from the heat. And another article in the Washington Post by Eugene Robinson, a writer, who says, excuse me folks, but the weather is trying to tell me something. Listen carefully and you can almost hear a parched, raspy voice whispering, what part of the hottest month ever do you people not understand? Well, we're going to leave it up to you. Are we in global warming, or do the greenhouse gases and the greenhouse effect, is that going to lead us to more ice age? Let's roll just a few minutes of that movie, please.
Most of our climate here on Earth has been friendly for the last few thousand years. But during most of the past 3 million years, the Earth has been much colder than it is now. And the regions where most of our food comes from were too cold to grow any food at all. Scientists have recently discovered that there has been a long series of recurring ice ages in the last few million years, with relatively brief periods of warmth in between. Each of these ice ages has lasted about 90,000 years on the average, while the warm interglacial periods between ice ages have averaged only about 10,000 years. This long cycle of major ice ages, approximately every 100,000 years, suggests that we can expect another one sometime soon. But what does soon mean in ice age time? And how much warning are we likely to have? And is there anything we could do about it even if we had some warning? Recent studies of ancient ice deposits and of underground layers of pollen from trees that lived 100,000 years ago suggest that last time, the final transition from a warm to an ice age climate happened incredibly fast. Not over thousands or even hundreds of years, but in less than 20 years. When the shift occurs, the climate in many regions of the Earth cools very quickly. Fruit and nut trees that need warm weather no longer grow in many temperate regions, and they are replaced by the kinds of trees now found only in areas like northern Sweden and Alaska. The glaciers will take many thousands of years to reach their maximum point, but the climate cools so suddenly that agriculture almost instantly becomes all but impossible in most regions of the Earth. Some recent evidence suggests that we may now be more than halfway through such a rapid, perhaps less than 20-year transition period, and that we may be less than 7 years away from the beginning of the next ice age. What could possibly cause a cycle of ice ages which recur every 100,000 years? Up until recently, many scientists have believed that the major ice ages are caused by very small changes in the Earth's orbit over tens of thousands of years, changes which have minute effects on the amount of sunlight reaching various parts of the globe. Some of these orbital movements do seem to cause relatively minor fluctuations in ice cover on the Earth. But the small variation in the Earth's orbit around the Sun, which very slightly narrows and widens on a 100,000-year time frame, produces changes in sunlight which are so minute, on the order of 0.5%, that many scientists now feel that this is not likely to be the cause of such enormous phenomena as the major ice ages. This orbital theory assumes that something has to cool the Earth in order to bring on an ice age. But Sir George Simpson, who was the head of Britain's Royal Meteorological Society, had a different idea. 50 years ago, he published a paper in which he suggested that some source of increased energy would be needed to move the huge amounts of moisture which build up the glaciers of an ice age. Presumably, most of this moisture comes from the oceans. But where would the increased energy come from? Sir George thought that the sun's brightness must change in some cyclical way over tens of thousands of years, but there has never been any evidence for this. Now another scientist has come up with a more plausible source of that energy. John Hamaker is a mechanical engineer trained at Purdue University who has been studying climate from a very multidisciplinary perspective for the past 15 years. Hamaker believes the energy to build up the Ice Age glaciers comes from a greenhouse effect. 100 years ago, when industry was spewing out the dirty waste products of coal, and then oil burning in great quantities, scientists began theorizing that the excess carbon dioxide from such massive burning of long-buried fossil fuels would trap additional heat from the sun and cause a greenhouse effect, which would eventually warm up the Earth's climate. Since we've been burning fossil fuels in enormous and ever-increasing quantities ever since, some climatologists have theorized that a greenhouse warming will eventually warm the Earth substantially, and that this would eventually melt the polar ice caps, which would raise sea level and flood coastal cities all over the Earth. But carbon dioxide, CO2, has been dramatically increasing in the atmosphere for more than 100 years, and there is little evidence of any global warming in all this time. In fact, Northern Hemisphere winters have been colder during many of the last 15 years than in all of recorded history. Florida citrus crops used to freeze about 1 year every decade. They froze 4 of the 5 years from 1980 to 85. New records have been broken over and over again almost every winter in the past few years. John Hamaker points out that the greenhouse effect has to occur most strongly in the tropics, since that is the area which already gets the most sunlight. The poles and higher latitudes, which get relatively few of the sun's rays, they're even dark much of the year, should be warmed very little by a greenhouse effect. When the tropics heat up and the poles don't change much, the temperature difference between these two areas of the globe increases. And when that occurs, any meteorologist can tell you what will happen.
It might very well be that the number of hurricanes would increase, and the number of tornadoes, not only will they increase, but the intensities might be greater.
In fact, hurricanes and tornadoes seem to be increasing dramatically in the last few decades. Some of the difference may be due to more complete reporting, since there are now more people to spot such weather extremes and report them. But the huge increases in the number of tornadoes reported seem substantially greater than one would expect from a slowly increasing population.
Chuck N. Baker back. We brought you a few minutes of the Stopping the Coming Ice Age by Larry Efron. Came out in 1988. Did acknowledge greenhouse gases, but says that we are going to be cyclical and get into an ice age. I'll let you, the viewer, decide. Finally, we're going to take you up to the American Legion. They had their convention up in Reno. The commander at that time, the state commander, Jeanette Ray, she is going to be up next, and she introduces Joe Rigsby. Joe is the commander of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and he has some interesting things to say about the Legion and the VFW. So let's roll that, please.
To make sure that all the veterans get the best representation at the state and national Congress levels. And again, I said this in the last sequence, but I do mostly thank all of you for your service to your country. The next generations of veterans is now serving here at home and far away. We need to support them any way we can. Someday, not too far in the future, these veterans that are serving today are going to be standing up here. And they're going to be working as we all do to keep the American Legion strong. I have the honor of being a member of two of the largest veterans organizations in the world. The American Legion and the VFW are the watchdogs in Washington, D.C. When our representatives stand up and fight for our veterans, past, present, and future, the people listen, because when you combine the membership of these two great organizations, all they see is votes. And that makes a big difference. I know you will hear a lot about membership, and just keep in mind, membership is what keeps us strong and noticed. Membership is the lifeblood of our organizations. We have the opportunity to really make a difference. To do that, we must be active, visible, demanding that the veterans of this great nation be taken care of.
Well, that's our show for today. We hope you enjoyed it. This is Chuck N. Baker and the Veterans Reporter News. We'll be back next week. Thanks for watching. Hey everybody, when you're listening to the radio, make sure you're listening to the Veterans Reporter Radio Show every Thursday night from 8 to 9 p.m. on KLAV. That's 1230 on the AM dial. It's the Veterans Reporter Radio Show with me, Chuck N. Baker.